Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join Conscious Capitalism Boston. Today's topic is exploring employee ownership as one model of conscious capitalism. We have three speakers. I'll just briefly mention who they are, and then we're going to get some further introduction from them once I pass the mic over. We have Dan Kennery, CEO and co-founder of Harpoon. If you're in the Boston area, you probably know Harpoon if you're a beer lover. So Dan was a co-founder of Harpoon, started back in 1986, and he led the conversion to employee ownership for Harpoon in 2014. So we'll get more details to that whole story and how life as an employee-owned company has been working out for them. Spoiler alert, very well. Second, we have Siobhan Prophet. She and I actually met for the first time at the social that we had in November for the Boston chapter. We had it at Harpoon. So we were all chatting about doing this event. So I'm glad that we're finally getting to the day of the event. She works for ICA Group, and what I didn't list here, also the Massachusetts CEO, the Center for Employee Ownership. And so she collaborates with business owners and other partner organizations, as well as local communities, in order to promote the employee ownership as a business model. So we'll hear more from her. And then Ralph Dumke, I'm so happy to have him. He's the founder and CEO of Waterline Industries. They build water and wastewater systems throughout New England. They were founded back in 1987 and converted to employee ownership in 2018. And he's become quite the advocate, as is Dan, for employee ownership. Both of them are active participants helping to advise other business owners who are interested in employee ownership and potentially pursuing this pathway. So without further ado, let me
just restart the device now. Can you please turn it off and back on?
Sorry, we have
yep, 1 minute.
people that are not muted. So let me just mute folks. The Conscious Capitalism Boston chapter's purpose, we always start with this in our board meetings, and we find it helpful just to get everybody oriented to why we're taking some time to gather and talk about these topics. So the purpose of the Boston chapter is to connect, educate, and inspire leaders and workers to consciously build businesses that positively impact.
Glad it worked out.
Yeah, I am too, trust me. Glad we ended out near the garage and found it on the what place to leave it. But I mean,
all
may have looked like I guess.
There we go. If you're not muted, if you wouldn't mind muting yourself, that would be great. It was a technical error on my part that everybody should have been muted coming in. And then our vision, we will foster the fundamental transformation of capitalism to a healthy, balanced way of doing business for all people and the planet. Quick shout out to all of our corporate members. I won't go through them by name, but these guys are critical to our Boston chapter and the founding and the continued engagement that we have across the Boston community. And then we thought it would be fun to just kind of start with a quick video that Harpoon did about their employee ownership. And so I'm going to play this, and then I will turn the mic over to Siobhan to take us off.
So I can remember when we made the announcement to our employees, we had gathered everybody in the beer hall for a special meeting, and came out and everyone was gathered, and I asked everyone there to turn to the person next to them and shake their hand and said, "You are all now the owners of the Harpoon Brewery. Congratulations." Boy, employee ownership, I think, means everything to us right now, in the sense that no one could have predicted what this year was going to bring in 2020, a pandemic. And I think having the strength of our culture because of employee ownership to fall back on a time like this has been amazing. How people have stepped up across the whole company, found a way to get after their jobs, think creatively, new ways, whether it's curbside pickup, delivery, outside dining. It's been amazing.
Being an employee-owned company is really like being in it together in every sense of the word. We're not just trying to raise the stock price for stockholders. We're not just trying to sell beer. We're trying to be successful together.
The employee ownership, it helps you communicate better. We're a 24-hour facility, so we work on shift. So if I'm doing everything I can to set up the next guy, he's going to be in a good spot to work as hard as he can to set up the next guy, and so on and so on. That way we can, efficiently get all of our work done. I think the ESOP just breeds into that. You want to give that extra bit just because everybody's going to win from it.
We really do not have people here who are just here for the paycheck. People are really becoming even more passionate about their work and about our company's success than they were before.
So as employees of the beer hall, we make sure that we're having a great guest experience of being as close to our customers as possible. So going around and checking how their beers are, giving them recommendations. People that I met 5 years ago, I'm still seeing here today, and now they're bringing in their families and bringing in possible new harpooners 21 years down the line. But it's great seeing them still come in and being just as much of a part of this brand as they were 5, 10, 15 years ago.
When you're buying a beer from Harpoon, you should know that it's really made with a lot of care and love because we are the owners of the brewery. We always have the saying that, we walk around like we own the place because we do. And I think that that's something that's really unique and interesting about Harpoon.
There are so many instances where I just kind of quietly, like almost well up inside, looking around and seeing people take stuff and run with it. That's not taught. That comes from the inside. Like people just really care. And we just see it every single day here.
Great. Such a good way to enter into our event today. And so with that, let me pass it over to Dan to just kind of give us slightly more information about Harpoon and the history and the trajectory of becoming an employee-owned company.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kelly, and good afternoon, everybody. Wish we were all doing this in person in the beer hall with a cold pint in our hand, but this will have to do. Yes, started the company in 1986, and about 8-9 years ago, my ex-partner and I were talking, and he decided that he would like a liquidity event with our business. And so, there aren't a lot of options, as many of you know, or people don't think there are a lot of options. So he wanted to pursue selling to private equity or to a large, multinational brewer like so many other craft breweries have done. And I decided to explore the employee ownership option and went down that path, talked to a lot of great ESOP companies. It is a very welcoming community, and learned that I thought ESOP could be a really viable option for us. So that the transaction occurred in July of 2014. I can't believe it. So 7.5 years ago, almost 8 years ago, we brought together a group of 5 banks because we had to do what's called a leveraged ESOP, where my partner wanted his money basically at close or shortly thereafter. So the company had to go out and borrow money to make the ESOP happen. But I would just have to say, since then, it's work, it's education and all, but the returns on it are outstanding. And I can't imagine having gone through COVID, without the kind of culture that we have. And that culture is really underpinned by employee ownership. So I'm delighted to talk with you about it today and answer any questions people have about, the process, the transaction, day to day or year to year, because they're not for everybody, but we have found that for us, we think it's been a great fit, and the culture has never been stronger because of that.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And we'll definitely have a chance to get into the questions, both from Siobhan, but also from the audience. And so folks can be saving up their questions to submit via chat for the last section of the event. Ralph, do you want to do a fuller introduction here of similar to what Dan did around just the background of your company and transitioning to employee ownership.
Yeah, thank you, Kelly. I started the company in 1987. Really didn't have any big expectations. I didn't think I was going to be the owner of a company. I was just going to go build a few pump stations here and there. And, you know, so the first year, I think the annual sales was $150,000. And then the year that we became a ESOP, it was around 38 or 39 million with just around 100 employees, just a little less. For me, it was kind of, I had a little bit different. I was a sole owner. When I started the company, I tried to get a few partners, but nobody was willing to take the risk, because basically you put everything on the line, your house, in fact, I got quite a bit of money for my 2 kids, but the options that do, you know, for me, I had 2 options, actually 3 options, because the one I did was the ESOP, but the other 2 options were sell to a competitor, or with a construction company, you have a lot of, especially over the 30 years or so, it accumulated a lot of equipment, cranes, excavators, all kinds of equipment. So there was the ability to just to liquidate. For me, the number 2 person that I hired is still with the company. So 33 or 34 years with the company. There's a lot of people that have been at the company 20, 25 years. And I couldn't do that, or just consciously couldn't do it. Liquidating the assets. And then also the other option of selling to a competitor, just, you know, I just couldn't do it. I don't think they would have been treated fairly working for a competitor, and they probably wouldn't have stayed. So the ESOP was the next option. I ended up doing it a little differently, was because I didn't have to pay off a partner. And I really felt like that these people would do a good job of managing the company and would be able to pay it off. And so I actually took the note I took a loan for the company. And we actually had to change banks because the bank didn't like the idea. They thought that they were going to actually get a nice loan. And when I took it, we ended up having to change banks. So we went in 2018, so we're into year 4. It couldn't have been a better experience. It was a huge learning experience going through the process. It was pretty scary. And at some point you were really wondering if you're doing the right thing. 4 years into it, there's no doubt in my mind that we did the right thing. Just so you know, I ran the business. My wife, I ran the construction end of the business, and my wife, Maria, ran the finance end of it. She did the accounting and the IT and all of that. So hopefully that's a good intro.
It is. Thank you so much. We'll get into some of those more specifics as we get into the presentation. Siobhan, do you want to take it from here and kind of introduce yourself, as well as just some more general stuff about employee ownership?
Absolutely. Let me just share my screen here. Hi, everybody. It's great to be here today. So I'm Siobhan Prophet. I work in outreach and marketing for MassCIO, the Mass Center for Employee Ownership. Are you guys seeing a mirror view right now? Okay, let me minimize this. All right, just a little bit about MassCIO and the ICA Group. The ICA Group, we are a national business consulting firm. We're also a nonprofit organization, and we are the nation's oldest nonprofit devoted to developing employee-owned enterprises. And that comes in a few different forms. Our home has always been in Massachusetts, but we do work nationally and with a specific focus in care industries, home care and child care. And we also have a loan fund called the Fund for Jobs Worth Owning that we work in partnership with MassCIO to help bring risk capital and really make financing employee ownership possible for a lot of companies. Some banks still view it as risky, but as we have seen and as employee-owned businesses continue to demonstrate, it's a viable investment for banks. And also the companies in the long run are more sustainable and profitable than conventional companies. So MassCIO is funded through the Mass Office of Business Development. There's just legislation passed a few weeks ago, actually, that makes MassCIO a more permanent part of our state government and not a line item that we pray gets refunded like every year. So we're really happy that things are moving and that this is really becoming a more foundational part of economic development and support in the Commonwealth. So we provide succession planning consulting services. Any business owner in Massachusetts is eligible for feasibility consulting, operational, financial, which is really a great help to get those services at no cost for folks that are thinking of doing this without having to spend tens of thousands on just the feasibility part. So we're really excited to be able to provide that. We also assist existing employee-owned companies with management consulting and training. And we also partner with other service providers, communities, cities, and governments to figure out how to implement plans to support employee ownership in their respective areas. And so I'm going to do a bit of, I think I have too many slides, so I might just run through things a little bit. And afterwards, we'll have plenty of time for questions. Please drop your Q&As in the chat if you think about them, and we'll get to them at the end. So a big part of why I'm here is because most business owners don't have an exit plan. And the majority of the businesses listed for sale actually never sell. And coupled with that, we really are facing a succession crisis with 10,000 baby boomers turning 75 every day, getting of retirement age. And these folks also own a majority of small and medium-sized businesses. So it really creates a crisis that we lovingly call the Silver Tsunami, where there's all of these businesses that are going to be ripe for the transfer of ownership. And most people do not know that employee ownership is a feasible option. Some benefits of employee ownership is that we can keep jobs and wealth rooted in the communities where they are, rather than selling to a third party that might break the company up or liquidate. This is really a force that we really believe in closing the racial wealth gap. It provides access to business ownership to folks that might not normally have that. Really preserving the legacy and culture of a business this way. And I know Ralph and Dan can speak more to this. Workers really benefit more directly from their labor invested in the business when they have an ownership stake. And it results in things, and there's some studies I can share with you later, increased productivity and increased resilience and strength during economic downturns. And also, so what is employee ownership? When we're talking about employee ownership, we're mainly talking about two main forms. ESOPs, which are employee stock ownership plans. That's Dan and Ralph's companies have this model. It's more appropriate for businesses, larger companies with more than 5 million in revenue and 50 to 100 plus employees. And worker cooperatives are more appropriate for smaller size businesses, although there are worker cooperatives with as many as 3,000 plus employees. Out in New York, everyone's really excited about a new startup called the Drivers Co-op, and they have about 4,000 signups. So they're making an employee-owned alternative to Uber, and we're all rooting for them over here in Massachusetts. A little bit more about ESOPs. So ESOPs essentially are retirement plans that own an ownership stake of the company. So they're governed by the IRS and the same folks that regulate retirement funds. In ESOP, the workers do not own the stock of the company, but directly, but through a trust, which is usually managed by a separate firm that manages on their behalf. Some benefits of ESOPs is that they tend to receive 5 to 12% more in wages, and employees at the end can have 250% more in their retirement accounts, which is just really remarkable. And just an example, this is a Massachusetts ESOP, Paragus IT. They have a pretty funky culture, and they really tout their ESOP status to be able to really cultivate and continue on this thriving culture in a competitive labor environment and to really retain good staff. And a worker cooperative is a business that is directly owned and controlled by its employees rather than by a single owner. And it's driven by a principle of one person, one vote. In worker cooperatives, there's usually board representation of the workers, if not like directly being on the board. And profit sharing is decided on a basis of patronage, but is equal rules for everybody. And these are some beloved worker cooperatives here in Massachusetts. I should mention there are 8,000 worker-owned enterprises, whether ESOPs or worker cooperatives in the United States. And if I'm counting correctly, at least 200 alone in Massachusetts. Worker co-ops also enjoy higher productivity levels. The annual employee turnover is less, much less compared to what industry you're talking about. And it's also been found that they're 2/3 more likely to succeed than the average US company in the same time span. So what does a transition to employee ownership look like? If you're wondering about this or know someone that'd like to investigate employee ownership, please send them our way. It really starts with establishing goals of the owner and the company, and assessing the financial and operational feasibility of this. That takes, several months, a lot of spreadsheets, a lot of interviews. And that is the portion that's covered under MassCIO services. And after then, it's a matter of planning the transition. If it requires a steering committee of employees, get them on board. Sometimes it requires, it always requires a rehashing and revamping of governance and bylaws and worker cooperatives. And it is possible to create democratically governed ESOPs as well. Then banks and lawyers get involved. We complete the transaction, and congratulations, you operate as employee owned with assistance from your providers for 1 to 2 years plus, probably. Involves a lot of training and culture building to make sure that folks have the skills and knowledge and confidence to work together and operate as owners. And so that is my little spiel about employee ownership. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to reach out to me directly. Here's my email address here, and feel free to visit us on massceo.org. And we're also trying to build our social media presence, so I'd appreciate hearing from you there as well. And now I'd like to, Kelly, if you could help me stop sharing my screen. There we go. We do have some questions that we put together for Ralph and Dan. And please, if you have any, please feel free to drop them in the chat and we will also get to those. So just start with Ralph and Dan. So in preparing these questions, I was really, considering the conscious capitalism values. And one of them really revolves around culture. And specifically, there's this quote here: all companies have a culture, but not all companies intentionally develop a culture that promotes their values and purpose. So what positive impact has becoming an ESOP had on your company culture and employee retention?
Want to jump on that first, Ralph?
Yeah, and then you can, so I'd always been one that, believed in volunteerism, especially in the community. So, and that was one of the things that I hoped once I turned it over to the ESOP, or turned the company over to the they're not the employees anymore. They're the owners. I'm really the only, my wife and I are the only employees, but, and that's one thing that I really feel good about, is because between the local food bank, and then they've been picking the charities lately, they've been doing a lot more than I ever expected, and even more than I had done, which really makes me proud. I think that the employees, because they now feel that it is, their company, that they can go ahead and do that. The other things that, and you can speak to this, but the culture had always been a kind of a family at Waterline anyhow. Like I said, a lot of the employees had stayed a long time. We did have some turnover, but since we became an ESOP, I think we've only lost one person has left. They wanted to be a missionary, and so it's hard to say no to somebody or get upset when they do that. But all of the new employees have told us, or told our HR, and have also told their supervisors or whatever, the reason that they came to the company was because it was an ESOP. And that was one of their major decisions in deciding to come to Waterline Industries. So I think the company culture, some of it was there. I think it's actually gotten stronger since we've become an ESOP, because they really do understand that they are the owners.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Ralph, that, we always had a highly engaged participatory culture here. The photo behind me is from one of our annual employee beer culture trips to Europe that we take everyone when they hit their 5th anniversary of employment, and every 5 years on a beer culture trip to either Europe or someplace in North America. So we've always had fun. We're a brewery, right? But the one thing that I would say about ESOPs too, and I'm sure, Ralph, that you've been told this and you know how true it is, it's not like flipping a switch, like, oh, wow, I might have a lousy culture. I become an ESOP, it's all fixed. It's ESOP's on a bad company, it's still a bad company. You have to really educate employees as to what ownership means. Some get it naturally, but others, it doesn't really make a difference to. So that's a multi-year ongoing project for us. It's in being inclusive. And the one thing I think people get is that, talk can be cheap. And companies talk about culture, they talk about a lot of different things. But, when you create an ESOP, you put your money where your mouth is. You can't get much more participatory and sharing than actually giving your employees a chunk of the company or the whole company. So our people really have responded to it very well, have stepped up. We have a group that is incredibly committed to our business, and we kind of feel like we're on a bit of a mission, if you will, to prove that in a very competitive consumer product business that employee ownership can be successful. So it undergirds, and strengthens our culture in almost every way imaginable.
Thank you. So following the thread of some values of conscious capitalism, another one is having a stakeholder orientation, that a business should create value with and for its various stakeholders, whether that's customers, employees, communities, the environment. And question to you again is, how does being an ESOP influence your stakeholder orientation as a business? Does it trickle beyond your employees as well? That'd be interesting to know.
I would like to think that it does, and it's reflected in the way we treat both our customers as well as our vendors. In addition, of course, to our employees. The basic golden rule of doing to others as you'd like done to you. I mean, it kind of underpins the way that we approach daily life here. And that goes with how do we welcome our customers? Before COVID, we had close to 500,000 people a year that visited us at one of our two breweries or came to one of our festivals. By the way, St. Patrick's Day Festival is this coming weekend. It's not too late to get tickets. And our vendors as well, who've been partners for 35 years in some cases. So yeah, I absolutely think it has to extend, Siobhan, beyond just the employee base to kind of how you treat everyone that you come into contact with and what kind of member of the community you are. We've done extensive work in the community since we started the company, whether it's the Angel Fund or the food banks or Save the Harbor, Save the Bay, it's kind of been in our DNA forever. So there aren't a lot of boundaries here for the way that we try to run our business and be inclusive and welcoming and supportive.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. So everybody knows contractors don't have good reputations. So when I started Waterline Industries, I had worked for two other contractors, and when I started Waterline Industries, and I told people this, and I told everybody that came to work there, was that at the end of the job, if you can't look the owner that you built the building for or whatever in the eye and shake their hand, and then the same with all of your subcontractors and suppliers, and you're doing something wrong and you shouldn't be doing it. And so, now, the company financially is in a better position than it's ever been in. And sometimes they'll find out that some other company, maybe a subcontractor or supplier, is struggling, and they'll actually help them by paying them early. And so that's the kind of thing where you have the stakeholders in our company also helping the other people, because without the suppliers and the subcontractors, we wouldn't be anywhere either. So it really is a team effort, and we make sure that everybody that we do business with understands that we're an employee-owned company. Right, the minute you walk in the front door, it's there, and it's also on our letterhead. It's on our website, and all of our guys and gals have this right on their shirts and their hard hats and everything else, that it's an employee-owned company.
Thank you. I have just a couple more, and then we'll turn it over to audience questions. There's some great questions coming in. Thank you, everybody. Here's a good one. If you were to do your ESOP conversion all over again, what would you do differently?
I beat my partner over the head to tell him not to be so greedy and insist on all of his money up front. I mean, Ralph was lucky in that he didn't have that issue. The fact that we had to go to banks and become a highly leveraged company in an increasingly competitive industry has been tough. That has nothing to do with the ESOP per se. I know it was a result of us becoming an ESOP, but that was because his decisions, not the ESOP. We had to structure it that way. And that has been a challenge going forward. So if I could have gone back and waved a magic wand, it would have been asking him to accept notes like Ralph did, and allow us to kind of term that out for many years as opposed to having 5 banks we have to deal with on a monthly and quarterly basis. Other than that, you know, we got very good advice. I said at the outset that what really helped us was getting to know a bunch of other ESOP companies. So those of you out there thinking about this, it is a very welcoming community. You can call Ralph, you can call me, you can get to know the people at Hypotherm, King Arthur Flour, Gardner Supply. There's so many great names in New England. And people will just will meet with you and talk about what the right things to do and what the wrong things. They'll share their mistakes with you. So we ended up hiring some really good ESOP attorney, advisors, you know, someone to help us with the education component, so that we avoided, I think, some of the mistakes we would have made if we had not reached out and gotten that help. So I would advise you, you know, if you are seriously thinking about doing this, reach out to Siobhan, reach out to us, ask the questions, because they are complicated and you can make mistakes with them.
Yeah, I can't say any more, but then to back Dave, because I think the one thing that I would do is get better educated, and I would rely more on those people that he mentioned, or, you know, feel free to call me or whatever, because I haven't met anybody that's an ESOP that isn't proud and willing to help you. And I didn't get enough of an education. I went to some conferences, I met some people, but I didn't really, in fact, I started down the road, and then because of, it just didn't seem right. I actually stopped the whole process for a year. If I had probably educated myself a little bit better by talking with more of the people, that wouldn't have been, and it would have been a little bit easier. Now that I've been through it, I would encourage everybody, go to as many of the ESOP conferences as you can, so that you get to meet all the people. I finally met a guy from Pizzagalli Construction, who is probably one of the biggest contractor in Vermont, but and the CFO there was, you know, helped me tons. And so there's a lot of people out there that are willing to help. And I think that was the one thing that I should have done, was tried to get more help to understand the whole process.
Thank you. Last one from me before I turn it over to Kelly to moderate our questions in the Q&A. Someone that registered posed a good question that I'd like to bring up here. PwC PricewaterhouseCoopers published a book many years ago about how CEOs across the country tend to ignore the voices and talents of their employees. The CEO attitude tends to be, do your job and you are a specialist, when in fact many people are still working their way up the ranks and toward a desired position. How does someone approach a CEO and help them change their mindset and bring up an employee ownership model? And I guess this would be a question for all of us, and me coming from the developer point of view. And I saw a question come up in the chat about, you know, does it always have to come from the owner's perspective? Like, does it always have to be an owner-driven process? So I think it's been mostly driven by an owner process, because those are the folks that have the most insight and access into long-term goals of the company and their own retirement, which are often things kept close.
And they own the stock.
And they own the stock, right?
You got to get someone to sell the stock to create an ESOP. So whether it's the CEO or other owners, but you got to get to the owners to have them agree to sell the stock, right?
Absolutely. So like the advice I would give there is, and that there are examples of, you know, we call them friendly takeovers instead of hostile takeovers, where it's something that's brought up to the CEO and the powers that be. And the advice I would have there would be to just educate and connect with other folks in the employee ownership space as much as possible. And and you can get some help in making that pitch. We have much less control over what happens there, as opposed to when it's the owner or CEO coming with the opportunity. Anything you'd like to add, Dan or Ralph?
Yeah, I coming as some like Ralph founded a company and CEO world, and there are a lot of misconceptions out there about ESOPs. And the original question here, I'm sorry that that's been your experience with CEOs. I hope I have not been like that as a CEO. But I sometimes found I've approached trying to spread the word about ESOPs, given my history and role as like a business owner, kind of trying to speak that language to other CEOs, because I've heard a lot of misconceptions repeated back at me from other CEO or business owners, like, well, no, I can't, they're way too expensive, or they're way too cumbersome, or I don't want to run my company like a commune. There are a lot of misconceptions out there about ESOPs from that level. And I try to clear those up and talk about, no, if you are approaching and you have to have a liquidity event, ESOPs can be a very attractive option. You can receive a full and fair price. And by the way, there are significant additional tax benefits as a selling shareholder in order to do an ESOP. Or if you can become 100% S Corp ESOPs, you don't pay any federal or state income taxes. So you kind of speak that language, you kind of get, all of a sudden you start to get people's attention up at the C-suite level, right? So I would just determine and answer to that question, what seems to be the focus of the CEO in question, and maybe try to go at it that angle, whether it's, hey, let's drive down turnover rates, or let's look at creating a better retirement asset for employees, or let's look at another way for you to achieve liquidity. ESOPs should be part of all of those conversations. And so whether it's, hey, do you know Harpoon's an ESOP? If you have any interest, Dan is available. He'd love to talk to you about it from a CEO perspective. So I would just go at it whichever way you think can be effective. I don't know what your thoughts are, Ralph.
So Dan, I think, well, first of all, I interpreted that question a little bit differently than you did. And it being that they, if an employee's at a company and the owner just doesn't, even this before you get to the ESOP, for me, when I, up until probably 10 years ago, I did everything, and I didn't take the time to teach anybody anything. And I didn't, I just basically did everything. I did all the estimating. I did the, pretty much my own cost control on all these jobs and everything else, and didn't hold the superintendents or project managers accountable. If there was failure, it was because of me. And so my wife pointed this out to me about 10 years ago, and said, you really need to start showing people how to do these things and teach them. And at the ESOP conferences I've gone to, the most complaints I get from the people that are not the old owners is that this guy won't get out of the way and let us do it. And so, or he just, he refuses to, let us help, or refuses to let us, even do part of the management. So I spent the last 10 years, basically training people, and it's hard when you've always just done it on your own, to slow down and teach people. And if and I made it sound like my wife pleasantly explained this to me, but no, she beat me over the head with a baseball bat to get me to do this. And it's hard as a business owner, especially somebody, Dan, I know that you started that company, and you probably run around still to this day, making sure that everything's right. But you probably also have a lot of other people there that know what's right and know what's wrong, and they know how to do it. And that's where I think the success of the ESOP was getting those people over the years, so they understood the processes, and they understood, how to do these things, and they got good at it. So when it came time for me to let the management portion of it go to them, and I basically now just do the estimating, and that's only because I like it. I think it's, maybe you got to talk to that CEO or the owner and get them and just explain to them, hey, I want to learn this. I want to be able to help you. And once you get to that point, it's actually a great feeling, I think.
That's great. Thanks so much. Maybe we'll shift to some of the good questions that we have in the chat for the remaining time that we have. The first one is fairly tactical, but I'm sure there's an awful lot of details that can be conveyed here, but just wondering if there's kind of a high level response here of when an employee is ready to retire, how are their shares valued and how does the company fund the repurchase of their shares?
Go ahead, Ralph.
No, go ahead.
No, again, ESOPs are very prescriptive, right? They're pretty regulated, and we have to do an annual valuation. So we hire an outside firm to come in. We're going through it right now, actually. It costs about $30,000 a year, $35,000, depending on the size of your business, where they come in and they go through all your books and forecasts and everything else, and then they come up with a number, a per share price that becomes the net selling price or repurchase price that you'd have to use for the next year. Some companies do valuations twice a year, but we do it on an annual basis. So that's pretty much by formula. And we have as trustees, the trustees have input into that process and conversations back and forth with the valuation firm, as does senior management when we present our plans for the year. The other piece of that funding, can come out of cash flow. You can have, debt used to fund the repurchase obligations. Companies come at that a bunch of different ways.
Yeah, so what we're doing is we put money away every year. So the other thing that the ESOP has the ability to do is it's not like the person walks out the door and they take a hunk of money with them. The ESOP can pay it out over a certain number of years, depending on how your ESOP was set up. It could be 1 to 5 years, something like that. So, but there's also a computer program that we bought that actually calculates, you plug in the age of the employees, what they make, and it'll actually give you an amount so you can project out over the years what you think you're going to need for that. So, and then just like Dan says, if you get overwhelmed at some point and you have to, the banks are always willing to loan for that too.
Yeah, there are protections that, as Ralph's saying, you can really defer. The only people you have to pay are people, if it's a death, disability, or people that hit retirement age. Before then, you can defer paying them until you've repaid your ESOP loan, for example. And not to get complicated, there are internal ESOP loans and the external ones. So for example, we had to borrow money and we're about 75% repaid, but we could defer all of our repurchase obligations until after we repay that loan, again, other than death, disability, or when people hit retirement. So there is some flexibility with it, but it is a real obligation. And as Ralph said, we've also have that software to help us manage our repurchase obligations going forward.
That makes a lot of sense. This is kind of expanding out just a little bit, but how do you connect the employees with the financials of the company so that they can act like owners and have the information as their current employees before they retire?
We speak very openly about our financial performance, and we share our annual numbers with our employees, and every single month we kind of share our performance metrics with everybody. We've also done it, and we need to do a better job of this. We have to increase our financial education. I went down for a great 3-day visit to, I think it's SR Industries, Jack Stack, great game of business, and what a legendary, inclusive leader. And they are 100% open book management. And it was really inspiring to see that. But they drove home the importance of the financial education component of this. Those of us on this call probably have different levels of financial education and knowledge, but probably a significant amount of understanding, reading spreadsheets and balance sheets and income statements, and to just put that out there in front of people is a disservice. So for us, it kind of comes hand in hand with sharing information and educating people as to what these numbers mean. That to us gets the most power.
Yeah, we're very similar. We after the valuation every year, we actually have a company party, and we have guess the value this year, and so that everybody's aware of what the value of the stock is, and about the the profitability for the year, so that everybody understands. And we do monthly, we let people know how we're doing monthly as a whole, as a company as a whole. So you definitely want to get them involved so that they know that they're the owners. One of my frustrations sometimes is that the employees or the owners actually are too cheap. We had a copier that was like 12 years old, and nowadays for the big plotters to do the plans and all of them now are in color and everything else, and the one we had was black and white, and I'm like, come on guys, you got to spend some money, go get a new plotter so that we can have these color plans. So sometimes it can go the other way too. They're too cheap.
I think that's a great example of people taking ownership mentality and really running with it. Another question: how are your employees represented in the governance of your companies?
We formed an ECC and ESOP Communications Committee made up of, I think it's 9 different employees from around the company that meet on a monthly basis, that run a bunch of both informational, educational, and then also social things throughout the year. I think, we didn't change the overall structure of our company. Beyond that, the board and kind of the management structure, everyone's an owner now. So at all different levels of the company, people have the ability to participate and contribute and comment and criticize and make suggestions. So other than the ECC, some additional social, things we do every year, celebrating the ideas program, we've again always had that participatory culture where people feel very, very involved with the business. So structure, and again, this is something I say to business owners that, who are worried about giving up control or inability to make decisions if it's by committee, that's not what ESOPs do. You can be as inclusive as you want to be. You'd be crazy not to be very inclusive. But as far as the structure of your business is concerned, you can set up with the trustees and the ESOP trust, but the day-to-day management, the way it's structured does not necessarily have to change all that dramatically.
Yeah, so it's almost like we duplicated what Dan did. So we had a management team in place. That did not change. The one thing that we did do that is very important was a communication committee, and they put out all the information, and it's a combination. In a construction company, the hard part is always because you have the field people and then you have the office people, and there's always a disconnect between the two. But this committee's, there's 12, and it's almost 50-50, but there's in that communication committee really puts out the information, and I think that gives everybody more of a comfort level too. It also allows the communication committee also puts in all of the questions, concerns, comments, everything else to the management team. So which is kind of nice, because if in case there is some something up, then it's a lot easier to do that way. So but they set up we have the annual party every summer. They set up all the other things, and then also that same communication committee also does the all of the charities. So they handle the choosing the charities, things like that.
Great. We're already at the end of this hour, and so I don't want to go over just in the respecting people's calendars and time. And so I just thought that maybe I would ask Siobhan to, if you have any last minute comments you wanted to make. I know you've been helping out in the chat with some of the questions there that we unfortunately didn't get to everybody's, but great questions, and didn't know if you just wanted to comment on any last elements there, Siobhan.
Let's see, there's a lot of technical questions in the chat that I'm not going to get to here, but we're here, we're available. We're one of the only states in the country that provides these types of services and funding to help our business owners explore employee ownership. So it behooves us to all make the most of it. And I'm just really thankful for the interest and participation of both our speakers. Thank you, Conscious Capitalism Boston, and all of you for attending today.
Yes, thank you guys so much. I'll make just a couple of final comments, but just want to thank Ralph. Thank you, Dan. This has been very helpful. Clearly by the comments and the questions coming in the chat, people are really interested, and so thank you so much for being generous with your time and sharing your experience. I know this is one of many times that you do that actually, and so appreciate that. Any final words or thoughts that you didn't get a chance to say in your comments so far?
No, I would simply, Siobhan, I had not heard that bill had passed. So I know it came out of committee. So if it's been signed and sealed, delivered, that's awesome because we all worked on it for a long time. But I would just repeat the offer that I made earlier. If anyone has any interest in talking more about ESOPs, I'd be delighted to talk with you about it. It's something I care about a great deal. So you can certainly reach out to me through dcanary@harpoon.com.
Thank you so much, Dan. Ralph?
Yeah, and likewise with me, I think that, you know, we are, my wife Maria and I spend a lot of time already talking to people that are considering doing ESOPs. And so we'd be glad to talk to anybody. So Kelly, you have my email address, but it's rdumke, D-U-M-K-E @waterlineind.com. Shoot an email. We can set up a time to talk and answer any questions you have that we didn't get to answer today. And that's where I think Dan's going to. So thank you, everybody.
Awesome. Thank you so much. As the last thing, I just popped into the chat. We do a survey after our event. So please feel free to click on that link and let us know what thoughts you have and any outstanding ways that the Boston chapter can help you. And then I'm also going to do just a final plug for our upcoming events. We have one event that'll be just over a month from now, April 4th. We're going to talk to the CEO of One Mighty Mill. You might be familiar with them if you're in the New England area. They're a great B Corp and have a great story. And then we're going to do an event on May 4th that is going to be addressing the Great Resignation and how companies can address that through creating belonging in their cultures. So both of those events are up on the website, and you can feel free to RSVP to them today. I know we went over by a minute, but just wanted to say thank you everybody for joining, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you all. Bye.